It seems to me that a God who wanted to play with the universe with a light hand and remain anonymous most of the time and use second causes or creative causes to do his work might very well use exactly something like natural selection to bring about the human body as nature's most perfect product. So, if anything, evolution seems to increase and make more reasonable the argument from design. The thing that is the most carefully designed thing in the universe is the human brain. We haven't yet made a computer that's quite that efficient. Now, the brain is very much like a computer. If you were riding in an airplane and the public address system said, there is no pilot, but this airplane is piloted by a computer, which has been programmed by a football player trampling over computer cards with spiked shoes this morning. You would feel perfectly content, right? No, I think you would pray. Or, this airplane has been programmed by a computer which was programmed in the following way. The keyboard was left out in a field last night, and there was a hailstorm, and the hailstones hit the typewriter keys. Again, you would not put much confidence in that plane. Well then, why do you put confidence in your brain to understand the universe and to do science if your brain is simply a product of mindless chance? 20 million years ago, there was no intelligence anywhere in the universe, as far as we know. And no one seriously maintains that the solar system was designed by extraterrestrials. So, if all intelligence now is totally caused by the mindless, pointless, and purposeless and accidental colliding of atoms, then why do you trust it? These arguments from the cosmos, I'm going to get into arguments from human experience in a moment, are less interesting to us, most of us anyway, than arguments from human experience such as the moral argument and the existential argument. But they're quite important because the attributes of God that are proved by this argument interface with the attributes of God that are proved by the other arguments. The moral argument, for instance, might prove that God is a moralist. Well, so what? Maybe he's just weak. Maybe he's just a fairy tale. Does he also have the power to create the universe? Is divine goodness and divine omnipotence together in the same God? If so, the consequences are enormous. So let's look at some of the more interior arguments. Arguments may take their data either from the external world or the internal world. There are facts that we observe with our senses, and there are facts that we observe with our interior senses. And one of the facts that we observe with our interior senses is that we all have a thing called conscience. We all make moral judgments. We all judge not merely that a thing is, but that a thing ought to be or ought not to be. That's simply a fact. Well, either moral judgments can be true or false, or they can't. Either moral judgments are simply expressions of feelings which we mistake for judgments, or they are what they seem to be. In other words, either there really is good and evil, or it's all an illusion. Almost nobody lives out the philosophy that it's all an illusion, it's all a matter of feelings, it's all a fantasy and a fairy tale. They may say it, they may write books about it, but when you treat them according to their own philosophy, it turns out that they don't really believe it. All right, if there is such a thing as good and evil, explain it. Why? If there is such a thing as moral obligation, if you are really obligated to do good and not evil, why? What is there behind the moral law? You see, there are facts about how things and people behave, and there are also moral facts, if this analysis is correct, about how people ought to behave, but often don't. What's behind these moral facts, which we often call a moral law? Mustn't there be a will behind a moral law? We feel as if we're being commanded, but we don't see anybody commanding us. Well, this used to be a very popular argument until, maybe 100 or 200 years ago, when moral objectivism, the notion that morality is objective, that moral laws are real and not just made up, became much less popular. So Cardinal Newman, back in the 19th century, formulated a version of the moral argument that should appeal even to the moral subjectivist, even to the person who says that moral rules are only things we make up, nothing objective about them. All right? Say to such a subjectivist, do you admire somebody who violates their own conscience? And they'll always say no. I admire somebody who violates the Ten Commandments, maybe, or the Quran, or the laws of the state, or any objective laws, but we got to be true to ourselves. Oh. So somebody who's a deliberately lying, hypocritical violator of their own conscience, that's not good. No. You got to be true to yourself. Why? Where does conscience get its authority from? Where did conscience come from? Is it just one of these results of mindless evolution? The brain just happens to be wired that way? Why bow down in sheepish obedience to the accidental fact that this is the way your brain happened to be wired? Why not wire it better? Or if it's just the voice of society, as Freud thinks, if conscience is just the superego unconsciously mirroring what other people want you to do, why bow down to them as if you're God? Or if it's just the training that you got from your parents, well, your parents are not infallible. But everybody, even the moral subjectivist, thinks we ought to treat conscience as if it were God's prophet. But if it isn't, why should you? But it can't be God's prophet unless there's a God. Dostoevsky's version of the argument is extremely simple. If God does not exist, then everything is permissible. When I cover Nietzsche in my classes at Boston College, I try to get across his very radical challenge to my students. And one of them is, why is there truth? Why bother with truth? Why truth? Why not rather the lie, he says. And they can't answer that. But there's another one about morality. Why be good? Why not be evil? Why not go beyond good and evil? If there is no God, why not be evil? And nobody has ever answered that question. It's an astonishingly simple question. Why not be bad? Well, because we'll catch you. No, you won't. I'm cleverer than you are. Well, we'll hate you. So what? I hate you too. I don't care if you hate me. Oh, because it's not conducive to the good of society. I know. I don't give a damn about society. Why should I? The thoroughgoing immoralist, it's very difficult to refute him if there's no God. I've got two arguments left. The argument from desire, I think, is my favorite argument because the premise is fascinating. The premise is that everybody's unhappy. Everybody desires something they can't have. Robert Browning said, a man's reach must exceed his grasp, or what's a heaven for? Think of the happiest time you ever had in your life. Think of the most exalted music you ever heard, or the most exalted lovemaking you ever participated in, or the most beautiful sight you ever saw, or the most wonderful intuition you ever had. Didn't it say to you, I'm just an appetizer. There's more where I come from. And haven't you looked for that more all your life? And you've never quite found it. C.S. Lewis puts it in these haunting words. All your life, an unattainable ecstasy has hovered just beyond the grasp of your consciousness. The day is coming when, after death, you will awaken to find either that beyond all hope you have it, or else it was within your grasp and you have lost it forever. The thing we desire is not to be identified with these wonderful earthly experiences that only provoke it, which are only its appetizers. In fact, that becomes clearer the happier you are. It's unhappy people who can easily be victimized by the superstition of if only. If only I had $1 million and a Learjet and a new mistress every day, I'd be happy. Well, no. Billions of people have tried that experiment. It's never worked. Not once. Not once. And yet we keep putting that car on the road hoping it'll go. To put the argument into a logical form.